Sorry I'm a little bit late. Somehow in the last hour and a half, I've lost a lot of my voice. So I kind of had sinus issues this morning and it must be going crazy. So I'm not doing a Batman impersonation or anything like that. I'm going to try to lecture this class. I got some hot coffee. Hopefully that'll help open things up, and let's go. First of all, if you are a Mac user, I posted a video out there today for you to review. Did I? Yes, I did hit record. Thank you. I appreciate that. Do that every single week. Every single lecture that you're listening to me, ask me if I recorded, because I've had 2 in a row that I forgot, or not 2 days in a row that I forgot to hit record. If you are using Mac, you might think that you can run Parallels and run Visual Studio on the Windows side of things. And you can, but there are definitely some hitches with it. So I would recommend doing running Visual Studio on the Mac side. And I posted a video today along with some instructions that talks about how to do that. All right. So we went over that tutorial last time, and again, we did not do the complete tutorial. There's a part of it that you need to finish for yourself. Today, what I want to do is I want to talk about annotations, and I want to start looking at the code in more detail, because scaffolding is great. It very quickly and painlessly gives you some pages for the CRUD functionality: create, retrieve, update, and delete. The problem is that in many, many cases, you need to go beyond that. You can't just take, that's a starter for you. The idea of scaffolding is that is used to build upon something. And so the scaffolding does some work for you, but you really need to do stuff on your own to finish things up. So it's important to understand the code that got scaffolded. Got scaffolded. All right. So let's first look at annotations. So we're going to start out by looking at the movie model. All right. If you look at this, there are things like this before fields that are enclosed in these square braces, square brackets. Those are called annotations. And those give more information about the particular property that is directly below it. So for example, these 3 things: display, name equals price of DVD, range 1 through 100, data type currency, apply to the price, which is right below it, not the one that's above it. I'll put some spaces to make it clearer. Display, name equals release date, data type, date. And here's string length, telling you the string length is up to 60 characters, and the minimum length is 3. And it is a required field. Now, these are used in a lot of places, several places. First of all, they're used to validate data that you enter. So let's go in and I went and set this up to run. Do remember to put everything that you add to your application on the menu. I can create a new. Now, I'm going to go and I'm going to try to enter an empty thing. Notice what I get. Title field is required. Why do I have that? Because it's stated as being required in the model. And that, by the way, also is used in generating the database for it. So if we say view SQL Server object, and we look at our database, we were to look at the movie table. Title does not allow nulls. All right. Why? Because we put that annotation in the model saying that it was required. So that's used as part of the validation. That's also used in creating the database. Remember, you want constraints to be applied on the database level because that's sort of the last line of defense. Even if something goes wrong with your validation, or if someone writes another application to access the same database table and they don't have good validation in it for whatever reason, or if someone manually goes and tries to update the database, like a systems administrator, by putting a constraint in the database that prohibits any bad data coming from any source. And remember that the database table is a reflection of the objects in the model that we use to create it. So it also requires to be at least 3 characters. So here we go. So I can't put in AA for the title. It has to be at least 3 characters. Release date has to be a date. It's a date field and it's required. Genre field is required. It actually knows that this field is required a different way. But the annotations are good, are a way to explicitly say that the field is required. And the price is required, and it can only be between 1 and 100. So I can't say 50 cents. Can't say $200. So I can say 20. Notice also the release date is this expression, release space date. Now the field name is release date with no spaces at all. It's generally a good idea not to put spaces in your field names. But to make it legible for people that are reading it, you can then make the display for that. And this will be in all of the screens that we do. So if we save this, it's called release date here. We go into edit, it's called release date there. We go into delete, and it's called release date there. Also details. Okay, so that display will be used, that display name will be used anywhere that this field is, or can be used or should be used anywhere this field is displayed within the application. If you don't have a display name, what you get is the name of the field. So for example, I don't have a display name for title. So it just displays the column name for title, likewise genre. Now, this field's called price. And again, we say price of DVD to make it more clear, because it wouldn't necessarily be clear if you just said price, what that corresponds to. It's like the price of a DVD, a price of a Blu-ray, price of a ticket for admission. What does price mean? In this case, we can clarify that by putting that on there. And also, if you notice, we said the type is currency, therefore we get a dollar sign in front of it. So these annotations are very important. You want to put them and document that model as well as possible, because that'll save you a lot of time later on when you do things and would scaffold things. Now, in order to do that, you have to be using system component model data annotations. You have to specify what libraries the classes you use are in if they're not part of the main library for C#. And in this case, that's where the data annotations live. We don't have that in here. We get the squiggly lines, which means that it has no idea what this means. It has no idea what it means because it doesn't know that we're talking about data, that we're including stuff from the data annotations. We put it back in and all the errors disappear. All right, so use these. These are good. I do have an example here that's going to be for a tutorial that we're going to look at later on. We could look at it here. String length, column first name, type of date, how to format the date. We want to apply the format in edit mode, and so on. One thing to notice that these fields are date time fields. So like the full date time can contain both a day and a time. So if we were to look at a date time field for right now, it would be 10/3/2023, 1:15 p.m. Sometimes we're not interested in the full date and time. Like, for example, if we were going to have someone's birthday, I don't know, unless we're doing an astrological chart of them, we don't really need the date and time that they were born, right? You know, so if you're registering for a system and it asks for your birthday, it probably is only interested in the month, day, and year. All right, that's data annotations. I do have some resources here. Remember that, you know, we have one lecture a week. You are encouraged to read these other resources that I have. And here we have a validation tutorial. This actually shows sort of the shows some more extensive things about this. One thing that's useful is what's called a regular expression. And those can be confusing, but regular expressions can be used to limit the way that you enter something in. For example, this regular expression says that genre is alphabetic. You can only use letters. The first letter is required to be uppercase. White space are allowed while number special characters are not allowed. So I couldn't put in, sci-fi exclamation point. All right. This one does allow numbers, so I could put in PG-13, for example. Now, there are regular expressions for many different common kinds of data. Regular expressions, by the way, are used not just in .NET. It can be used elsewhere as well. And you can think of things that fit a pattern and have a pattern for it. For example, what's the regular expression for an email address? Oh, they suggest doing it a different way. I can't find the regular expression for it. Phone number is another one. Can be used, that there's a regular expression for. If you run into difficulty with something, let me know and I can give you a hand with it. All right, so do this, use these when you define a model. All right, next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the code for the Razor pages. For example, when we run this initially, for movies, we go to the index page. The URL is /movies, and that /movies is mapped to movies/index. So if we don't specify anything after the movies, it assumes we mean movies index. It'll bring us up to the same page. And it gives us a nice little list. If we enter another movie in, it lists all of them. Now, one thing that you are to do in the tutorial is you're to work through adding a search for this. All right. Okay, let's look and see, first of all, how the index page works. And then we're going to look at, when we do this, we're going to look at both the the CSS_HTML file and the CSS_HTML.cs file. So look at movies index. We look at the CSS_HTML file. I'm going to look at the CS file. We're going to start with the CS file first. Because remember how this works. This model, this .cs file, fills in some variables. And those variables are used on the CSS_HTML page to display the actual data. I actually do not like the way this is written, because this mixes up attributes with functions. You have a function here. It's a constructor. You have an onGet async, which is a method. And then we have public ilist movie, get set, and default. I prefer to have all the attributes at the top of the page and then have all the methods. Much better, more organized way to do it. That way at a glance, I can look and see what attributes are available in the model to be used on the page. Okay, this one has a constructor. Constructor is code that gets called when the object is created. So when this is created, this gets called, and it gets passed in the database context. Remember that the database context roughly means the database that we're working with in this case. So this will get passed whatever our database is that we define. That we can look at it here. Razor Pages movie context. That gets passed in. And so this page knows what database we're working in, and that database gets stored in the context. So underscore context is our database. We have on get async. So what does that mean? When does this get run? This runs, we'll talk about asynchronously later on in the course, but asynchronously means it doesn't have to be synchronized. So it's not going to wait at this point to continue. On get means when this page is called using the get method. Well, when is a page called with the get method? Well, when the page is initially loaded. So when we click on that navigation link on our navigation to go to movies, and movies index.cshtml gets called, on get gets called. On post will never get called on this page, because the only time on post would get called is if there was a form on this page and that form had a submit button that would submit this using a post method. Now, when you add the search criterion, you very well might add that to the on post method. You'll see how the tutorial walks you through that. But right now, because this doesn't have any form, no search criteria, we call on get anytime this page loads. All right. We make sure the database context has been defined correctly, and make sure that there are movies objects in that context. This is effectively saying, are there any movie objects in this context? And if there aren't any, if that's null, then we don't do this. If it's not null, in other words, if there's some present, it's going to go and do this. Movie equals await context movie to list async. Okay. .NET uses collections and lists a lot, all right? Because if you think about it, there's a lot of lists when we do when we create an application. Like in this case, it's a list of students, and there's code that we can write to process those lists. All right, so we would want to have some code to process this list, and therefore we get a list of movies. Now, this could be confusing because we have movie here, we have movie here. Those are different things. This movie is the I list that we declare up here. So we have a list, an I list specifically, called movie. What this is saying is this I list can only contain movies. So I list is a list of movie objects. So movie in this case is the class, movie is the name of the variable here. Doesn't have to all be movie. I could say this has to be movie because that's the name of the class object, but I could call this movie list if I wanted to, provided I changed it everywhere on this page and everywhere on the CSS_HTML page. But I'm not going to do that, so we're just going to call it movie. What this is saying, give me all of the movies in the database, make a list of them, make a list of all the movies in the database, and put that in this list variable movie. So, assuming that there's some movie objects in there, give me a list of all of them and put it in this variable movie. Now remember, this is declared as an attribute and it's declared as a public attribute. That means that the CSS_HTML file can access it and can pull data from it. All right. So this model has just one simple task that it does. When the page is loaded, as long as there's some movies, give me a list of them from the database and put them in this list object called movie. All right. Simple enough. The CSS_HTML page then does use that. First of all, this page is defined as being a class index model, which inherits from page model. Page model is part of the ASP.NET framework. This is saying that for this CSS_HTML page, the model that's relevant is the one in pages, movies, index model. This one right here. With Razor pages, that's always going to be the case. Here we're putting the title in view data title. View data is another way that we can pass data to the second, to another page. In this case, we're passing data to the shared layout, which takes that view data that was passed and fills in blank. All right, so what do we have here? We have then a list of HTML that gets certain key spots of the HTML, gets values from our model injected into the HTML. So here we have an H1 that says index, okay? Here we have a paragraph with a link to the create new page. Here we have a table, and the T head contains a list of, contains a TR, that contains THs, that contains values from our database object. So what this does is the @ sign is a tip off that we have some server side code in here, and that's going to pull something from the model. So we have a function HTML display name for model goes to model.movie0.title. This is known as a lambda expression. It's sort of like a way of calling a function with arguments. So what we're putting in the argument for display name for is this field here. Model movie 0, so 0 title. Now, where do you think that title comes from? Well, it comes from the annotations that we had before. But wait, title doesn't have a name, display name. Well, in that case, it just uses the column name. So effectively what this does is for movie sub 0 from the model, the first movie on the list, sub 0, display the name for this field. So this displays the name of the title field. This displays the name of the release date, display name for genre, price, and director. Director is a field I added using, when I created this example from the tutorial files. So what this is going to do is this is going to create HTML, except some blanks in the HTML get filled in from these little snippets of server-side code, which grabs information from the model. And calls this function to create the HTML for the display name for this particular field. Now, if we look at this, we can see the HTML that gets generated. If we view source here, we'll see all this stuff that comes from our layout CSS HTML. And there's that TR that got created. There's our table with the THs. This is pulling the names of field in the database model. TH with title. Where to get title from? From there in the model. And all the way down the line. Now the assumption is, which is an accurate assumption, the display name for title in the first movie is the same display name as for the 100th movie. So we don't need any kind of loop to loop through all of them or anything. We just grab the first movie's display name for the title, for the release date, and so on. All right, now the body of the table. we got a loop. Because remember, a list is potentially multiple items. So this I list contains movies. There could be one movie in it, but there could be 100 movies in it. We want to display every movie, so we have to loop through and display each movie one at a time. We're going to create a row, a TR row, for each movie, and we're going to fill in the blanks in the TDs with values from each movie in that list, properties of that. So what are we doing here? For each item in model movie. So this loop is going to execute from here to here. And notice how effortlessly we mix this C# code with our HTML. Where you see an @ sign, that means it's C# code. We don't even need to do that down here for the ending curly bracket. So we're going to repeat lines 38 through 59 for each movie in the movie list. So we're going to create a TR tag. That TR tag is going to contain a bunch of TDs. And the first TD is going to display the item, not title. What is item? Item is that temporary variable that we're putting each movie in turn as we loop through that list. So the first time through, item is going to be that first movie object in the movie list. The second time through is going to be the second movie item in that movie list, and so on. We're going to do that as long as there are there for every one of them. And we're going to grab and display for the title, release date, genre, price, and the director. We then create links to, we created a link to the ad up here. That one's easy because when we add, we don't need to know any IDs or anything. But when we edit, show the details or delete, we need to get past to this page the ID number. So these links are going to go to this page, but are going to get, as part of the query string, the ID. Let me show you what I mean. If I go and run this, I look at this link, you can see it down on the status bar if you look really close, or we can view page source. The link to edit says movies/movie/edit ID = 1. Well, 1 is the ID of that first movie. We need to know that because when we get into the edit page, we want to edit one specific movie, and that ID field tells us what movie it is we want to edit. So we need to pass it when we need to edit, show the details of it, or delete. So that's how we add that ID to the query string to point to this. Now, what I want to do with the end of this session today, the remaining time, what if I wanted to add a new field to this table? What would I need to do? And I'm only going to change the index, all right, because that's all we covered. But let's go in and how do we add a new field? Well, we have to update the model, right? Because we're using the model first methodology, which means that all our changes go to the model, and then the model is used to sync to the database, to sync up the database. So if I add a Let's just add a field for review. All right, so we made our change to the model. What do we do next? We go to Package Manager Control. And we create a migration, because this is a migration is a set of database updates. And then we update the database. All right. Now, when you go and run this though, well, when we originally scaffolded the page, there was no such field as review. So there's a blank space for it. I'm sorry, there's not a blank space for it. It's not even included in the list. So how would we change that index page to include the new field? Well, do we have to do anything to the model? No, because all the model's doing is retrieving a list of movies. So regardless of what attributes are in the movie, it's retrieving all of the movies, along with all of the attributes for the movie. So we're clear here. Over here, what we'd have to do is go and add review field, create a new TD, or review. Now, none of these films have any reviews, so we won't be able to see anything in there, but we can see the blank space if that is of any use. That's where review would belong. Now, if we edit, we haven't changed the edit to include that as well. But it would be a very similar kind of change. We'd have to add to the screen. In fact, let's go and do that. Let's go and change edit very quickly. Do we have to do anything on this side? Actually, we do not. This one's a little more involved, but we're clear for that. We just need to add to we'll look closer at this, the insert and the update next time, but just showing you how you would do that. And now, when we go and run this, go and add it, and it will show up with the movie. All right. Feel free to go in and look at the other files, the other pages that get scaffolded, the insert, update, insert, edit, view, or display, and delete. We will be looking at those in subsequent classes, but we will be doing, you know, if you want to get a head start on those. All right, your next assignment, I believe, involves creating a new table, creating a new, I'm sorry, not a new table, but a whole new project. So we're no longer going to be doing a movie project. I don't think. Let me check before I put my foot in my mouth. Yeah, we create a new core app. But the model is going to contain only one table. Employee ID with all this information. And you'll go and customize and delete everything that's not needed. We're only dealing with one table at a time right now. All right, we're going to make sure we get that down, and then we'll start looking at when there's related tables involved. Are there any questions? Yes. Is it redundant to use the annotation? No, I would just go ahead and explicitly do that. That gives how do I want to say this? That makes it explicit in the model that that's required. So yeah, I don't think that's redundant. I think it's okay to do that. Other questions? All right, that's all I had for today. If you have any further questions, let me know. If we'll either see you in lab or see you next week.